Initiating moisture.
Welcome to the Moist Meter. Today we're taking a look at The Hunt. I've seen more advertisements for this movie than any other movie of the last few years. The marketing budget for this movie must be more than Disney's, because this shit was being crammed up my ass constantly with new trailers, and with every trailer I saw I got less and less interested. I didn't think it was going to be a very good movie. I thought it was just going to be kind of Twitter argument the movie, because that's what it looked like. You know, there's fucking professional 30-year-olds that argue with 16-year-olds on Twitter daily, and that's the kind of energy I got from the trailers. But I'm happy to say it was a good movie. I enjoyed it. This is obviously a very politically driven movie, and the movie never really takes a side. It seems to just, take shots at both sides equally, and it doesn't really seem like it has all that much to say aside from just being an enjoyable satire. That being said, I think the comedy blows ass in this movie. That might be a personal taste because I'm not a huge fan of political comedy. That shit just kind of makes me roll my eyes. But in here, it's really heavy-handed, on-the-nose, easy shit. For example, when a character is dying, another character goes over to them as they're fading out and says, "Climate change is real." And shit like that. That's the kind of humor that you're in store for when you buy a ticket for The Hunt. So if you're going for the comedy aspect, I don't think it works well, at least in the dialogue. There's physical comedy bits that I think work really well, especially in the first act. The first act of this movie I think is very strong. But when characters start talking to each other, it's fucking terrible. It's listening to two Redditors try and out-enlighten each other. It's awful stuff. I really didn't care for the dialogue, and there's only one likable character, which is Betty Gilpin's character. Betty Gilpin carries the shit out of this movie. She is great and just an excellent badass character that you can actually root for, which is especially refreshing given every other character around her only ever speaks in politics. There's not a single conversation that happens between characters that isn't politically driven. I'm not exaggerating, every conversation begins and ends with political discussion. Even when they're mid-gunfight, it's, "Oh, these liberal cucks always talking about climate change or something," or in the other realm, "Oh, these redneck fucks always talking about sister kissing." It's just, they can't talk to each other. It's only political Facebook posts that they vomit at each other. It's so hard to listen to the dialogue, and that's a real shame because it brings down an otherwise really fun movie. The action, I think, is so well shot and really well done, especially in the first act. I think the first act is by far the strongest part of the movie. It's even hard to realize who you're even going to be following, who's the main character of the story, because so much is getting tossed at you at once, and I think that's great. So you're constantly surprised, there's constant twists, there's a little to discover, and then at the end of the movie, they have a beautifully choreographed final fight that I think is just really enjoyable. Overall, the movie is just really well put together. Objectively, it is a well-made movie. It is well acted, especially by Betty Gilpin. It's just, I feel it went so hard on politics that everything had to be political. It couldn't have just subtlety. Subtlety is never a word you'll hear tossed around when talking about this movie, I doubt, because there's none of that here. It's not very clever in its writing or anything, and I think that just brings everything down a peg, because everywhere else it was pretty successful at what it wanted to do. When it wanted to do action, it did it right, it did it well. When it wanted to do an emotional moment with the main character, it does it really well. She has some interesting things to say and some good speeches, because she's really one of the only characters that can kind of talk to people and have things to say about things that isn't just, the pseudo-intellectual political jargon. And overall I do say it's a good movie, but I think you're going to need to go in there with some low expectations. Regardless of what side the political spectrum you're on, there's going to be, jabs tossed your way, which I think is good. They throw a nice balance of everything out there. I don't think any of it's particularly well written or anything, but they at least try. This movie doesn't take a side. It's just pretty much right down the middle. I think it's a pretty inoffensive movie, to be honest. I think the controversy was really overblown. Plugging this into the Moist Meter, I'm giving it a 65%. I enjoyed the movie. I think it's a good movie, but I also think it's a movie that's going to make a lot of people just kind of sigh, because a lot of the shit in it's just kind of embarrassing to watch and listen to. But overall, it's a good movie. That's about it. So yeah.